Good afternoon. How are we both?
Hi guys.
Yeah, good, thanks.
Good.
Hi everyone. I've just been briefed. My son's just been taken to Kenneperu to check if he's got a broken foot.
Oh, that's
Oh,
exciting.
I've got my 4-year-old daughter I'm supposed to be babysitting, so I'll maybe be in the background on this call today. Anything
free
could happen. It would be one of those calls like where kids wandering in the background.
It's excitement.
Yeah, very good. Feel free to just listen in.
Well done.
Yeah. Well, we might as well just start talking. We thought this time maybe we'd just go through some of the news that we've posted over the last couple of weeks, because we're now on the eHealth forum, and for some people it's easier to watch stuff on YouTube in the background, or just listen to stuff on YouTube in the background rather than go and read stuff. So it was funny because I read the story about Toronto and smart cities, and I never really kind of got the concept of a smart city. It was kind of like it kind of just feels like, it's the internet. Is that what everyone? Did you guys think of smart cities being something completely different? And that so Toronto anyway has cancelled the smart city that they were planning on building down on the waterfront, and it felt very much like, oh yeah, a smart city, lots of technology. And then, when you start asking them, well, what technology? The answer was, well, we're not really sure. And what would the technology be used for? Well, we're not really sure. And so then you kind of end up in this situation where I'm kind of like, well, if you've got 4G or 5G, and people have access to it, they're going to start using it in lots of ways. Do you need to specifically design a smart city? Do you know what I mean? It feels a little bit like technology overreach. So it was a good article to see that kind of things have kind of calmed down a bit, it appears, in Toronto, and be an interesting kind of question, because we're trying to do some of that stuff here in Wellington for a while with some companies, and I'm not sure did they ever come up in Christchurch, Mike? A smart city?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, they're building that in slowly, like you say. What is a smart city? Like, what is the definition of it? Like, to me, I suppose the internet's an enabler for that, isn't it? It's the stuff that you build onto that. I mean, America's Cup, they sort of demonstrated what they could do around data collection and live streaming, but on the boats, but
kind of, what did they need in order to do that? Well, they needed an event. Well, it's not very smart. Do you know what I mean? And then the event needed to put in a bunch of infrastructure, which of course, they were going to do because they got, return on investment on. And what did the city need to do? Well,
I always think smart
probably not much. Do you know what I mean?
That's right. Yeah,
just be a city.
I always think the word smart, is that an anagram or something? Am I missing something?
Yeah.
Does it mean something else?
Yeah. Very good. So so that was quite an interesting article, just about kind of how the blood is cooled, and everyone's kind of looking at it through rational eyes and asking what are good questions. So a really good article after that I posted about apps not making blood pressure devices or blood pressure monitoring more effective. So they gave people a bunch of blood pressure monitors that were standalone, and a bunch that were connected to their phones, and it turned out that people with the ones connected to their phones didn't do a lot better at all than the people that just had the blood pressure cuffs. Now, what's not really clear to me is how much better they did than people that didn't even have blood pressure cuffs. So there is some evidence that having these types of things at home do make a difference, but it's interesting that the app, at least the one that they gave the people, didn't make a difference for the people that were in the trial. So it's quite fascinating, because it says to me that just capturing the data is only part of the problem. Do you know what I mean? You have to look beyond just capturing the data and look at the motivation for some of this stuff as well, because it's definitely not, has to be kind of that win-win thing, like can't just be, hey, you can be our friend and give us data. And so we're experiencing that at the moment with some surveillance stuff for COVID, which is we're getting really low response rates for a surveillance framework. So basically reaching out to the public via our text messaging solution to try and find people that are willing to go and get tested for COVID. And unsurprisingly, not many people want to do it. because the question is asked, I mean, you know, it's all very well and good that you're asking me, but what's in it for me kind of question. So yeah, so I don't know, what else have you seen in there, Mary, that we should have a quick chat about?
1 second while I switch screens.
So just to check, you guys have switched from Yammer over to eHealth Forum, is that?
Yeah. So that's forum.hins.org.nz, and so we got Nathan, who runs that. It's connected to HINS. We've got Nathan to build us a special view, so it looks kind of quite a bit like how Yammer used to look, but we've got 2 columns. It goes down to 1 column. But it means for lots of the people that we would normally work with who are part of Kiln or part of HINS or doing medtech stuff as part of CMDT, they don't have to log into our thing specially to do our thing. And so you can see the standards, the technology standards people have moved there as well, and DICE use got a bit of a forum there as well. Feels like it's in the depths of winter because there's not that many posts, but
I've just managed to log in, so that's my first time into the new post.
Awesome.
While I'm talking, maybe I'll just do a quick intro on Alvaro, who's on the call today.
Yeah, cool.
So he's our new data science lead at ESR, and well, I won't talk for him, but first time to this group for him.
Very
so
good.
Lots of opportunities, and great to see data science at ESR is gaining some extra traction and I think growing. So yeah,
It's good. It's good.
Yep.
You can say hello, Alvaro. Maybe tell everyone who you are.
Okay, yeah. Well, first of all, nice to meet you all. I've been on the job for a week and a half, more or less. Yeah.
Yep, very good.
So yeah, I'm trying to understand everything that goes on in ESR. That's already quite overwhelming. Just so much, so
Very
many
good.
different groups working there. And yeah, I mean, my background is really in astrophysics, so it's quite far from what you guys are usually dealing with. I did that for like 10 or 12 years, and then I moved into precision agriculture and Agritech, that sort of space.
Yeah.
I was working a lot with Cespri, the kiwi fruit market here, doing stuff for the horticulture industry and avocados and that sort of thing. And essentially all of that is data science and getting insights from data analytics. So now moving into this other space, like public health, and yeah, and I'm really keen on hearing what you guys are up to and where can data science help collaborating with you guys.
Very good, very good. Nice to meet you, Alvaro. Welcome to the conversation. So normally, just so you're aware, and I'm sure everyone else knows, and you haven't forgotten, that we normally save these because it's being recorded at the moment, and they go onto the actual the forum as well, so that people that couldn't make it can listen to us talk about stuff. And if you miss one, you can go back and watch it in the background if you like as well, because more about the talking than about the beautiful pictures that we've got of ourselves on the video. So yeah, cool. Funnily enough, there was news of an AI model this week. Alvaro, you've probably not been on the site yet, but Mary's just posted the link. So there was an announcement about an AI model detecting Parkinson's disease. So people were told to go home and wear a belt overnight, and that belt must have some sort of stretch sensor in it or something, because it measured a lot of the breathing patterns for the person while they were sleeping. And interestingly, so it tested pretty well with an OROC of about 0.9 using their test data, 0.85 in the wild, which was pretty amazing. And they mapped it to EEG data. So basically, they kind of didn't know. What the characteristics were that they would look for, and or whether breathing would give them the right characteristics they needed for predicting it. So they mapped it to EEG, and we were able to come up with a reasonable model. I mean, just off breathing data is pretty impressive. Like, it's one of those things that you kind of go, wow, one attribute. And then I think about kind of maybe the reason that it was able, and you, for those that don't know, Parkinson's is kind of an intent kind of thing, and it's quite surprising that non-intentional muscles, such as your breathing muscles, maybe the agonistic ones in your chest wall, but it's quite surprising that your breathing would be so affected potentially so early on. I don't know, Mike, if you know much about kind of the biomechanics of breathing. I bet you do.
Yeah, a wee bit of it. Maggie Lee Huckabee has done quite a lot of that in swallowing research, and it affects that side of things as well.
Yeah.
That's sort of tied in. It amazes me that they can detect the Parkinson's quite early on.
Yeah, it was quite surprising.
But was it before the people knew? Like, was there some?
It was before they were diagnosed. So
wow.
in their study, they found 12 people that hadn't been diagnosed with Parkinson's, who were then diagnosed with Parkinson's because of the model. Wow. So it was quite interesting. So I wonder how uncomfortable it would be wearing one of those belts at night. Do you know what I mean? To do the measurement. I guess it's something you kind of put up with for a few nights or something. I don't know.
Yeah, it surprises me. Like, you can do that breathing through ECG as well. Like, if you're depending on how many electrodes you've got, that if they're measuring ECGs, they could do impedance measurements. But so there may be something else that they're detecting through the bands.
Yeah, maybe.
As well, maybe. Yeah. Some of that muscle movement.
Yeah. Muscle activation stuff. Yeah. The cool. So that's good. I went to a really interesting AI thing on Monday afternoon. There was a doctor from China talking in bioethics, and it was really interesting, basically because they're busy dealing with, it sounds like, the same problems we've got, which is how do you actually implement AI into a health system when you might have research evidence, but you don't have practical or operational evidence of benefit, but you understand kind of the risks. So that kind of came up, and we were talking about the difference between using building models with physiological parameters or physical principles versus social indicators. And so that was quite an interesting conversation as well, because I got to ask one question, which was literally that one, and he went, "Oh, that's a really good question." He said, "Well, we've kind of always just trusted that the lab systems are built on physics, and therefore the way the sensors work is always going to be the way the sensors work." But he said, "Yeah, no, we're increasingly looking at how we have sensors for doing social science kind of measurement, and starts to run into some much more biased kind of measurement and reliance on biased measurement." So it's a good conversation. And then there's a big telehealth webinar tomorrow night. Oh no, tonight. It's tonight where they're going to talk about remote patient monitoring. So if you've not got anything on between 7 and 8 and you don't want to watch television, but you want to see Ruth Large talk about telemonitoring and telehealth in New Zealand, feel free to join in. Should be quite an interesting conversation. So yeah, quite a high-powered conversation, I think. Quite senior people in the health system talking at that. Ben, you might be quite interested in that.
Yeah, send me the link. Is it just a listen in type of thing with a?
It's a so it's a kind of an educational webinar thing, but generally speaking, you can ask lots of questions. So it's good. It's good.
Yep. Yeah, I'll be keen to have a listen.
And there we go. Paste that, and then so I've just pasted that into the chat. And Mary, was there any other news on the forum that you thought we should let people know about?
Obviously, we have put out our health sector innovators survey out. It's been passed along. Thank you to those who have already filled it out. Awesome work. We're getting a bit of feedback from that, which is brilliant. That's just going to be an open survey to capture as things appear, but the intent is also for Eileen and I to present our finding back at the HINS conference in December. So looking forward to seeing what's coming through with that. There's been some interesting things that have been shared so far. So also we have put together the innovators landscape spreadsheet, which is also up on our eHealth forum. That's just been us going through and just finding out what we know about who's doing what, and just trying to categorize it a little bit further. And then John's probably going to do some fancy overview on it to make it look all awesome. But we will also have a link to a form for anyone else who'd like to add to anything or update, and I'll capture that and pop it in. So
yeah.
Sorry, Mary, where is that? Sorry, guys. Where is that?
That's on the eHealth forum in our
Okay.
emerging health tech.
So just
page.
across the top, there's a learn more here thing. So if you click the here, you go to you find our tags. You'll find a link to the survey. You'll find a reference to this meeting we have, and then a list of I think it's 130 things, Mary, on that list.
Yes, it's getting up there. Yep.
Yeah. So if you wanted to update anything on there that's got your name against it, feel free to do that, and tell us what it is. So yeah, there's obviously, I don't know what Eileen did an update on the ACC fund, ACC Innovation Fund. So where's that got to? Do we know?
I do not know.
Oh, okay. So are there winners? There might be winners. Here we go. Okay, so successful recipients who have been awarded grants. ACC Innovations. I don't know who they are. The Wayfind TBI team. So I know who they are. Health One. We know that they're in Christchurch. Jeez, is this only Christchurch people are getting money? Caro Data Management is getting some money. University of Auckland's getting some money. Te Piha, Romerome and Turama Limited are also getting some cash. So I'm assuming if we click through to the link, you'll see who they are and what they're working on. Mary, might be useful to add them to our list of 131 people doing things.
Yeah.
So now that that's been posted
actually, Eileen did send something through today.
Very good.
I think that was a hint.
Yeah, very good. Okay. So that's part of the job, is now to try and keep this list up to date, so that, you know, if you were thinking of doing something, or you are doing something, you can keep the rest of us up to date as to kind of where things are at. So tries not to be too complicated, and mostly about connecting people with problems and teams together. So hopefully that's a useful thing to people. Maybe I'll take a bit of a left turn now and say, I was going to have a chat with Richard earlier this afternoon, and I was emailing Justin earlier this week to be a part of the conversation, but I fell apart, and I've spent an hour with Sujan earlier from ESR talking about a little bit about wayfinding, but mostly about kind of building 3D models. So Mike, you're on the list. Mike, Justin, you're on the list. Richard, you're on the list of people we need to talk to, and it's kind of that. Can we build 3D models of hospitals so that we can do lots of stuff with them? And so we've done a bit of a mind map, and I can post the link in in here so you can have a look at it if you're interested. The password is stupidly John Herries can't spell Wayfind, so he spelt it wrong as the password. So so kind of quite an interesting conversation, and just even the three of us ended up in a situation. Oh, the two of us, sorry, ended up in a conversation which we got quite a lot of detail out of the conversation, which was quite good. And basically, the next job is to come and have a chat with you, Richard, have a chat with you, Justin, and then figure out whether we can put together a bit more of a kind of an hour or 2 hours to kind of work through what the model might be, so or what the opportunity might be to do something. So funnily enough, I then ended up talking to Phil King and Soleil, who work in our digital hospital infrastructure team. And I said to them, what do you guys think about this? And they're like, we just started asking money to start doing work on this. And I went, oh my goodness, yes, we're joining up the dots. So that was good fun. And so if you've got anything else you want to add to the mind map, or any ideas or any problems or people we should be adding, so feel free to do that, and we can kind of move that forward. The other conversation that Justin's aware that I've been having, which might be an interesting one for other people to contribute to, is around robots. I think I messaged you about that, Mike, as well. Basically, this has come from Soleil and Phil going, hey, we're going to build these new hospitals. We're struggling for workforce. Could we put robots to deliver meals or deliver, laundry or supplies or whatever towards? And they said, and the numbers we're getting out of industry at the moment is sort of 150 grand a robot. And so I was busy Googling around looking, and I found one for 18,000. But one of the things, Alvaro, you might know more about than some of us coming out of the Agritech industry, is there's quite a bit of robotic stuff going on in Agritech at the moment. So obviously way more than what we need. you know, it's busy picking the kiwi fruit as well as putting it in the basket and moving around. But who do you have any knowledge of any of the teams that are doing work in that space by chance?
Yeah. So, for example, there is this company called Robotic Plus in the Bay of Plenty, and they tend to, you know, they, for example, developed sort of a proof of concept of a kiwi fruit harvest hand, you know, of actually several hands that would be picking fruit, you know. So it's quite cool because you have, essentially you have, you know, below that you have a camera, you know, which is running a computer vision model to detect the fruit first. And then you have the second part, which is the actual robotics, you know, that tries to pick the fruit. It's quite cool. Unfortunately, in Agritech, yes, there are lots of solutions like that, you know, like a very impressive technology, sort of a proof of concept, but the actual adoption of the technology is incredibly slow and frustrating.
Well, I think we're probably going to be slow, but it's interesting because we're about to start ramping up investment in building hospitals. I think there's 6 on the list at the moment that are either funded or under development. And so, and the interesting thing is, you know, delivering, I'm on their website looking at the video that's playing in the background, and some of the stuff they're doing is way more sophisticated than we need. We literally need someone to load it up in the laundry, it to go where it's told, stop if people get near, and then go again. So it might be a bit of a simpler use case than some of the other stuff. So it's kind of human avoidance and or kind of a mapping thing. Funny that a mapping thing connects up to the previous conversation.
Happy to make connections if you want to talk to some of these guys.
Yeah, totally. If you know someone at Robotics Plus, it'd be really great to talk to them. If you could do that.
I talked to a lot of. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, go Ben. Go.
I talked to a lot of people locally in Hawke's Bay. I'm part of a kind of a cluster, an improvement cluster. So we're linking in health with other industries. We chat shop about different. It's more focused around lean thinking and lean methodology. But when I talk to those guys, especially lately over the last 2 years, there are massive problems with recruitment and trying to get, you know, overseas workers, stuff dried out, and just getting people to pick the fruit was a major issue. So they're, at least in principle, really trying to pursue the robotic side of things, and they believe that's like a huge part of what they need to do going forward, just to meet that labor demand. So certainly, and that's what I'm hearing at Hawke's Bay anyway.
Yeah.
I did see too, when I went to see Spark a few months ago, they had a little robot. I think it was about 40 grand. It was just a perimeter security robot. So basically all it does is kind of like your vacuum cleaner. Yeah, just wheels around a route. You kind of go, hey, go around here and take 360-degree videos as you go. Yeah. And I thought that's actually reasonably affordable in a sense. Like if you use it to support an existing security team or existing something, it's not doing anything particularly clever, but it's programmable to kind of go around the campus.
Yeah, totally. I think that's kind of the interesting thing is there's probably a lot of low value jobs which, you know, we now no longer get to as a health system because it turns out everybody's busy and because no one's doing it. You know, I'm sure things are going wrong because of it. Something, Justin, in that conversation I was having with Sujan earlier was that question of whether you need constant GPS signal or constant location signal. And something that occurred to me was you could, for all of the signs that you put up, put a small QR code in the corner, which would reground the location of the device that you were dealing with if you lost signal. That was something that I thought, oh, that's quite a good idea. So yeah.
Yeah, and Google technologies now have, I mean, they can recognize physical things. So, you know, you could just point your phone at the escalator, Google, I know what that escalator is and where it is. So now I can reorient you. So,
that's another interesting one, because on that wayfinding thing, I looked at this a couple of months ago. I was just curious how Google would interpret our campus. You know, it's like, oh, take me from here to there. And it sort of was like, oh yeah, that's a path. And it was sort of working out what was a path as opposed to walking across the grass. I was like, I wonder how it's doing that. So I reached out to Google and Apple, and they have some sort of indoor mapping solutions that they have, like Apple had for airports and stuff, like Singapore Airport. So you can basically, which the advantage of that rather than an individual wayfinding app is you're basically mapping out your campus using a tool that's pretty ready to be available. So you don't have to tell people, hey, come to our hospital and download our app. It's like, just use Google Maps and it'll take you from your car park straight through to the thing. Like I love the idea that people are supporting stuff and building apps, but I wonder, these guys have already kind of got that fairly nailed. You just need to label things, and it's
totally,
it's an admin job.
I think it's that base level of having your infrastructure mapped and available.
Yeah.
I think is kind of step one. When I reached out to the Google people, I got told that the team had been shut down that was doing that stuff.
Exactly. That's
true?
What they, yeah. So Apple, I reached out to Apple. No, I can't remember which way around it was. I don't know if I went Google, then Apple, then back, but I think from an Apple point of view, I went through all the hoops to finally get it done, but by the time I went through there, they went, oh, sorry, we're not fully supporting this thing. But Google did give me some stuff that I think you can build. You get your own kind of kits and different things, and you can kind of build your own maps with it. But you need a sort of quasi developer resource, I think, to kind of play around with it. I just didn't have anyone at the time to do it, but I think that stuff is there. And in a way, like the Apple Map thing was cool, but then a lot of people don't use the Apple Map thing, do they? They just kind of download the Google ones because it's better. But
that was always the thing. Google Maps are better than Apple Maps. They've just rolled. I think Apple Maps have just rolled out an updated version for this country. Because they were way better. They used to be.
All right. One of the things that I was at, because I agree with all of those points being around the ability to just draw on what exists today, Google, Apple, why reinvent a thing. But one of the questions that we had when we were looking at the fact that Auckland has gone and got a whole bunch of BIM model data, so it's got like 1 trillion data points that map its entire building, was knowing where a thing is and where it wants to be is useful, not only from getting, for me to get out of the car park to mum's bedside, but it's also useful to know where that precious bit of kit is, where we've only got 6 of them and you need that pump to move a patient from this HDU unit to this next unit, and you need to track that thing, let alone like where are the wheelchairs, let alone being in a stairwell and going, hey, there's a spill, I'm going to take a photograph of that so that someone from the cleaning service can come in and clean it up and acknowledge that the job is done. They're all jobs that are dependent on knowing where you are. And that was one of my questions was, and I don't have the answer for this, like I like the idea of just going straight to Google Maps, but if I actually have a preferred route for mum who's got twins and a pram, because it's easier, or we've got construction going on our campus, is Google Maps going to like help me guide that?
Well, there's a few things there. One, I always thought wayfinding for patients, that's cool. There's also wayfinding for staff. So we were doing 100%. Clinical emergencies recently, and they're like, there's a cardiac arrest and this person's about to die and they're over in such and such a place. And they're like, where the hell's that? Like actually think like helping staff out is cool too. And
turn left in 10 minutes.
And just like a simple little route. Like
CABG, big signs that say cabbage trial, CABG trial, that are like stuck all over our elevators because we're trying to direct trial patients, research trial patients.
Bits of paper around the place. And as soon as people say to me, it'd be really cool, Ben, if we did those painted lines around the corridor, I'm like, oh God, please don't mention those, because updating them every few, it's just
our emergency department loves those things.
Yeah, they do. They just, but like to me, you would have it just built into an existing native app, and it would be like, I'm a patient, tell me how to get around. I'm a staff member. Well, you probably got ID access, so you can go this way or that way. Wouldn't you? I don't even reckon it'd be that complicated.
Mike, you're trying to do some of the device stuff, like the device location stuff. I don't know what you can add to that.
Yeah, so we use something called Stanley, well, it was called Stanley or Black & Decker Era Scout, which is really great for tracking equipment. And you sort of can do tracking people and equipment as well if you give them an iPad. But you have to be real careful. That's where it crosses over into that whole, what are you using this for?
Gets creepy question.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. You have to be a bit careful with that. But we've just been looking to this. Justin sparked our interest in this as well, and it's a really good piece around that whole, how do we engage with communities and get them into our facilities? And we've been looking at the do not shows for some of our things, and it's like 40% do not shows for some of these clinics, and can we improve that better to get rid of some of that wastage? There's a I don't know if anybody's heard of Maze Map. So Auckland University use a way guiding system.
Do
that
they?
looks quite interesting. Yeah, so it's a company called Maze Map. and yeah, it's on their site, so you can look through buildings and stuff like that. That it doesn't do the same as like Justin had one that you could lift up and it could show the, you know, an augmented reality view. It's purely just mapping, but yeah, I think it's such a, you know, when technology for engaging communities, get them into the hospitals, that's such a massive you know, fix that we need to do, and around the equality piece as well, I think would be really good.
Go ahead, Joe.
Sorry. I was going to say one thing I saw, there's a guy that I follow on YouTube, because I watch people that make stuff on YouTube, make a TV type stuff, and there was a guy based here in Wellington that turned a Volkswagen van into like a you know a holiday caravan thing, and he had to build a model of his cabin for his van, and so he just went around with it might have been his phone or his phone camera, or it might have been a proper camera, and stitched them together using a 3D modeling and made a point cloud basically out of that. It's like, shit, that was pretty impressive, just so that he could make an indoor 3D model of his van basically. And so he obviously moved it around enough to be able to do that. So it's on his video. I don't know if that's an easy thing to do or a hard thing to do, because I haven't quite looked into that yet, but it looked easy. Well, you know, it's all in the edit, isn't it? So maybe harder than you think. What's that, Ross?
I was going to say we did Canterbury did when I was at Canterbury. RFI for wayfinding for both the Burwood build and the Hagley, whatever it's called now, build. But neither of them got funding. So there's actually a whole lot of research and design docs for those two builds somewhere in the ISG archives.
There you go. A secret treasure trove that I should ask James Ellison to dig up for me. Might do that. Okay. Very good. What else is happening out there in the world? Alvaro, were you really, really excited when the new telescope got commissioned?
Very
Given you used to be in astrophysics.
Yes, especially because we've been waiting for that. It's one of those things that 10 years ago they were about to launch, you know.
Yeah. Every year for the last 10 years they were about to launch.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, it was very exciting.
Yeah, I tell you what, the photos, like, and I know nothing about astrophysics, the photos are impressive. Just what was most impressive to me is they got a micrometeoroid hit just before they started releasing some of the production images, and they're actually able to route around that micrometeoroid somehow, and that's what impressed me, because of some of the curvature of the mirrors gives them some sort of ability to correct for it. They got struck much earlier, I think, than they were planning, but yeah.
Yeah, no, it's very impressive. I mean, it's really impressive technology, man. So yeah.
Had to all be folded up and unfolded, and yeah, lots of tricky bits. And then the heat shield to keep it cold. That was pretty amazing. I thought how that kind of expanded out. Just amazing what you can do with technology these days, you know. Like, imagine trying to do that 30 years ago. It would have been just about impossible. Trying to do that remotely. You would have had it go up in the shuttle. I imagine that might have even been probably the way they were trying to get it up there originally. And, you know, you'd have bloody astronauts crawling all over it, turning screwdrivers, and yeah.
Yeah. Now, one thing now is that astronomy will rely a lot more on space telescopes towards the future, because the sky will be just full of satellites.
Well,
thanks to Elon Musk.
Yeah. Well, hey, digital equity, like availability of internet.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what a smart city is, Mike. And we were talking about what is a smart city at the start of the call. A smart city might you can't see the sky, but you can get internet everywhere.
Exactly.
I like that movie WALL-E, is it, where they leave Earth, and it's like, yeah, that's a bit of a scary prediction, I suppose, for some of that stuff, isn't it?
It is a bit.
Did you see that Uber Health is now offering transport solutions to patients, medical staff, and caregivers in Australia?
Oh no! What are they doing
there? So apparently this is the first country they're rolling this out to outside of the States. Yeah. So it's pretty much transportation. Yeah, by ensuring that more patients and staff are connected with rides. enables providers in Australia to improve appointment attendance, lower costs, and improve patient satisfaction, allegedly.
That's totally cool. It's good. So because I've been looking at remote communities and trying to connect them, and I think, did I mention this to you guys already? I can't remember if I did. It was a different call, but some of our communities, I'm like, why don't we just, rather than trying to get care delivered remotely to them, we just make it easier for them to kind of travel down and access care. Like I was thinking of trying to fund an electric vehicle for a community, and actually, yeah, that's really interesting to see that space. Like thinking that it's not always technology that you need to solve it. You can actually kind of, imagine it going to a community and saying, hey, we can give you this kind of access, but also you got access to the shared community vehicle, these kind of supports and that type of thing.
So it looks cool. It looks like, in the States, it was launched a couple of years ago, and it involves a HIPAA compliant dashboard and API that healthcare organisations can use to book and pay for transport for patients, generally those who are elderly or vulnerable and don't have private means. So,
I'm assuming there's an API for it.
Yeah, must be.
Because we've got the National Travel Assistance thing as well. I wonder if you could plug it into the National Travel Assistance system. That'd be an interesting question. We should. You should send that to Nick, Mary.
Yes. Cool. I've
Good
sent.
idea.
There's the Pulse IT one if people have a subscription to get into that. That gives a bit more detail.
Very good. Very good.
That's interesting. It just made me think like that Uber connection, instead of us providing our own transport, or like I was reading about a community in Canada that we're going to invest in more buses, like $250,000 buses, and they're going to buy 5 of them or something. And in the end, they were like, oh, why don't we just partner with Uber and basically subsidize everybody's rides? So they didn't invest in the infrastructure. They just went, if anyone wants to go from their home to the community center, it's pretty much $2. Or if anyone wants to go to the library, it's $2. Or, they basically just subsidized key rides and basically didn't invest in any of the kind of big infrastructure. Just made me think of that when you thought of the Uber thing and the national transport thing, like actually subsidizing those players to come in and help rather than us coming in and buying vehicles all around the place, gathering dust and what have you, and getting stuck with insurance and all sorts of crap that we can't provide it. It's just, I think that's really fascinating to me, how that might work. Not from a health point of view, but from a public transport point of view. Interested to see how that plays out.
Yeah, I think that's where they've been trying to go for a while, and it's kind of that question of cars are still personally owned, kind of, you own your car and it's your asset, and certainly I think that's kind of Tesla's view, and Uber's view is at some point, do you need if there's a car there whenever you want to go somewhere, and then you don't have to pay, you only have to pay to get there, and you don't have to worry about having a car. How many people want a car at that point, especially if they solve that autonomous driving thing, and it doesn't necessarily need to be an all day everyday thing. I'm just thinking about going home from the pub on a Saturday night, go home from the pub and the car turns up and you jump in and you don't have to worry about driving it. That sounds pretty bloody good. I mean, it is a taxi, but probably be cheaper if it's just the car.
Combination of Mevo and Uber.
Yeah.
It's going to turn up. I don't know if others have Mevo, but
Mevo in Wellington, yeah, it's
I did see a Tesla Mevo outside work yesterday, so you can really pick and choose your cars now.
I saw a Tesla Uber yesterday on my way into work, and I don't know, I'm one of those people that kind of looks at the clean car discount, realizes how much buying a car new is, and then goes, no, maybe not. But basically a red paint job on an Uber takes you over the clean car threshold, and this was a red one, and I was like, oh, okay, so maybe it's worth spending probably about $9,000 on a red paint job, because the rebate plus the extra costs of the red paint job. It's going to be a weird one.
I think that's where they went wrong a little bit with those subsidies. Like they, rather than doing blanket subsidies for all middle class people so they can afford an electric car, they should have targeted electric car buying for communities, and actually actually go, hey, we're going to fund 5,000 electric cars for deprived communities in a car sharing scheme, and everybody else, like that would be, because you're going to drive a massive inequity with electric vehicles. Like we're going to all cast off our gas guzzling things and someone else is going to pick it up and run with it, you know what I mean? And they're going to have to pay for the petrol because they're not going to be able to afford to get onto the kind of electric vehicle chain. Like that'd be the way that thing should have been done, I reckon.
Yeah, it's
we looked at
it's an interesting question about policy choices, isn't it? Because presumably the country spending money on new cars is actually a good thing, because it kind of keeps the economy afloat. But at the same time, yeah. What was that, Mike?
We looked at electric vehicles, like on a smaller level, just getting between buildings, like driverless autonomous vehicles. So a little while ago, just for that whole, like, you know, tying back into wayfinding, just getting from building to building. You know, if you can jump into an autonomous electric vehicle, it takes from our main building across to outpatients, and then you don't have to worry about, you know, getting people with P license for transporting, you know, passengers and
50 meters or 100 meters or whatever it is,
down
the ramp and round the corner, and
they trialled one out at Christchurch Airport for a long time. Transporting.
I saw an example one in Wellington not that long ago. Michelle Dickinson was riding in it, something to do with NZTA. I don't know if they were the same ones, but yeah, it's definitely something that we should be thinking about, that mobility around campuses, because it's definitely a use case if you've got mapping. We need the mapping. We need the mapping for 3D models.
So coming back to mapping, sorry I had to step away to take a clinical phone call. One of the barriers that we identified back in the day when I first started as a Lean Six Sigma guy, we wanted to map our processes in terms of pathways.
Yep.
And we've got no platforms for mapping, like, I guess, the sort of the treatment pathways, let alone physical pathways. So we've got no master data set that we can then track variability against to say, oh, actually, this is the normal pathway. And yet, for this cohort of patients, they seem to be doing this weird thing. Is there any thinking in that space going on, John, around sort of a platform that we can start? Oh, Ross has got his hand up. Somewhere we can start building.
Ross will build it in Visio for you.
Oh,
and then no one will be able to open it.
Please not Visio, please. That's what we did. We put it all in Visio, and then
I can't think of the tool set we used, but it was Datacom. This is when I was in Nelson Marlborough. Datacom came and saw us, and we gave them an anonymized version of our entire ED, because our ED is completely paperless, so it was quite easy to say we've got all the data, but we don't really have any useful information out of it. But we gave them a data set, and they ran this. I can Google it and find it, but we ran this process mapping automation tool set over it, and it told us if a patient comes in the door, they had something like 197 different journeys, out the other door, sort of thing. And it was surprising. It was like the number of patients that didn't go through a normal triage process, or didn't get seen by a nurse, or didn't get seen by a FSA, or all these kind of variations, and it showed bottlenecks too. So you could see that drew it on the page, and you could timeline it, so you could see where certain journeys, where someone was waiting for a particular test, they were suddenly waiting for 4 hours, and you could see certain areas where you had bottlenecks. It was absolutely awesome. And the software cost a fortune. That's why we didn't even do anything with it, being a little DHB. But it was, I'll find it. And
thank you, Ross. Yeah, because in the same way that John started his little the mind mapping around the physical movement of things, it'll be great to start understanding how we're going to start tackling that, because there's ProMap and there's all these tools, but we've really got to get a handle on this.
I'd used ProMap before, but that's all kind of manual. Well, back in the day,
manual, is it?
Manual. Yeah. Well, it's probably better now, but it was kind of manually map your processes and have them in a collaborative place where everyone could kind of maintain them. But
what do airlines use? Can we just use something from the airline industry? Like, surely they have more than Visio to map out flights to Heathrow.
In New Zealand and Fonterra and that use Microsoft, Oracle Snow Strategic Network Optimizer, but it's a supply chain optimizer. So it's like, if you map everything, including fuel costs and predicting number of passengers and World Cups and things like that will have an impact. It's like, if I buy an extra plane and put it onto this journey here, I can make this much money out of it. Or if I cut back on, by 1 can of beer per in storage per flight, I can save this many cents. Or you do all that sort of stuff with it.
Yeah, I'd still like that, especially for our orthopedic surgeons.
Yeah, I think there's kind of this interesting question about that life cycle question. So you've got the design of whatever the process is, and then you've got kind of the operating of the process, and then you've got that question of whether the process is operating well. So should you go back and redesign? And one tool to rule them all is always kind of the ultimate goal. But even when we're trying to build digital products, we go somewhere between Miro, Figma, Jira, Confluence, and then writing the code and putting it into GitLab and running the code. And so I kind of wonder. I think so we had a guy come in as a part of the move from data and digital being in the ministry to being in Te Whatu Ora, and we did a mapping thing, and most of that was manual. So that might have been connected to the product. I think Ross, you guys might have used before. The guy's been around for a wee while, and he bought it off, I think, Datacom. But it's not cheap, and it's the maintenance of it, I think, is probably the interesting problem, Justin. That being said, obviously we've got pathways, health pathways, which is mostly kind of primary care, but in Christchurch, increasingly hospital stuff. The observation I'd make is the national patient flow data set that got designed, that was kind of a little bit about where that was going. But the problem with that was fundamentally it kind of ended up in a situation where it turns out there's lots of variability in processes in hospitals because it's like the pointy end. That's the reason we have so many people in the teams. The teams are so highly trained to basically deal with the ambiguity of the process. But like, it's good question, Justin. Like I kind of wonder why you might not use something like Miro, but how would you plug the data into it? Is the kind of you need to be able to have the visual of the pathway, but at the same time have the data plugged in. Lightfoot, I think, in the UK do some of that stuff as a product, like that process mapping stuff. But
it sort of joins up to a question that I have in the back of my mind about the evolution and development of our sort of, for want of a better analogy, air traffic control capability, like our integrated operations capability, and where are they going to be, and what are their roadmaps going to be, and how we can, I don't know, leverage Te Whatu Ora to support one another.
Yeah, I think the interesting question is, we probably need the real-time data that's coming out of the hospitals, and I don't think we're getting that at the moment because the first focus is just on getting a handle on what are we even spending our money on, let alone trying to figure out what's happening right now. So there's like a report once a day maybe, or every couple of days is where they're at the moment, because that's what everyone can handle, and that's still not every what used to be every DHB yet. So it's a mountain of work because we kind of just don't have any of it, Justin, because we never operated it as one system before. So all of that one system stuff just doesn't exist.
Yeah, so for our local deployment of the integrated operations center, we focused on like the 0 to 3 day time horizon, but we always had a vision for, okay, well, that's decisions now. But there should be a weekly or fortnightly view, and then there's a monthly view, and then there's a 3-year plan view, and they should all kind of harmoniously join up. But
yeah, I'm sure we'll get there.
Okay.
Yeah, and we'll be able to then see live all of the people walking through all of the corridors in a 3D map, and we'll be able to measure the wear on the vinyl, and we'll be able to divert people, be able to send the robots to block off a corridor and divert all of the traffic for half an hour while we do some maintenance with the robots, some of the pipes and things. I'm sure it's coming, just maybe not tomorrow.
That one I just posted. They're used in the UK, but they do that integrated operations center for you need to be a reasonably digital hospital, and you need to have something like Stanley Aero Scout or something like that kind of, or the teletracking's own real-time location services kind of built into it.
Yeah, the hospitals I was in the private hospitals in the UK all had that for all of the beds, and basically tracked all of the beds through all of the elective processes, so that they understood, how long has that person been sitting in recovery, and what time did they go back to the ward, and did they like that, and what were the clinical kind of impacts of that sort of stuff. So they were doing that when I was there 4 or 5 years ago. It's fascinating though, because lots of unnecessary movement even in those hospitals, where someone would come and move the bed 3 meters and then realize, oh no, I can't go quite yet, I haven't got the radiology. So they'd walk off and leave the bed 3 meters from where it started, and then come back 2 minutes later after they get distracted talking to somebody, move the bed again, and then, oh no, we've forgotten something else, or the patient needs to get up and go to the bathroom, or do you know what I mean? Like just so much variability that you're trying to manage in some of that stuff. So
looking at that,
I just remember watching the screen, and like they did a playback of this this bed going through their recovery, and like it was just this random as scribble. And I said to him, how's this any use? And he goes, oh, well, when you lay over, 50 or 100 beds on some of this stuff, you start to see everyone's got a scribble down towards the bottom. And what's the scribble down towards the bottom? Oh, well, it turns out that we prefer to have people when they come through in the bed closest to the nurse's station, because we've got so much paperwork to do. We need to be able to see some of the stuff from the nurse's station. So as it empties out, we shift all of their beds, unlock all of the brakes and shift all of the beds over so they're closer to the nursing station. And it's like, holy crap. Do you know what I mean? Like that sort of usability thing was a screen scribble on the screen. And I'm like, why is this a screen scribble? So
we're using some of that for wheelchair, and I think the next step for us is to chuck it all on a whole lot of wheelchairs. So when you start putting it on lots of things, you start, you're seeing how the system works from that.
So there's a wheelchair baron in Christchurch Hospital.
Well, yeah, maybe we'll see where they're all going.
Charges $5 a wheelchair. Yeah.
Well, we need to put a sensor in the river, I think, because that's where some of them end up. And but I think, it's good from that point of view, because they're like, going back to that Uber conversation, they're like Uber for in the hospital, and it's like understanding, if you've booked one and whereabouts are they, how long have we got to prepare for that? So
ECG machines, we're always, probably want to start putting them on staff. It's funny, Sujan and I were talking about, so you're on a ward and you need a house surgeon, and you've got a phone number, or you've got 3 or 4 house surgeons working on that, or maybe you've got a couple for the team, and you ring one of them and they're like, oh no, I'm not on today. You have to ring the other one. So you ring the other one and they're like, oh, well, I'm at the other end of the hospital. Blah, 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 who's in this team will look after it for now. And if you could see where they were on the hospital, you kind of might have gone, oh, actually, they're in one of the rooms on the ward and I just haven't seen them for 15 minutes because they've been doing a procedure or something like that. So that sort of thing might actually be quite useful for a people side, Mike. You think about orderlies, but actually, for people that work across wards, physios, OTs, social workers, junior doctors, it might turn out to be, hey, can we bring the closest person if they're available, rather than necessarily the person we have to call who might be on their lunch break or whatever.
We've sort of got that now a little bit. So each house officer's got an iPad, and we track the MAC address so that they keep losing them. Now we can find them, not the house officer, the iPad. But it sort of does raise some issues around that whole privacy and, where are they? Do you have areas where you can't be tracked? So there's sort of a safety zone or a...
well, there's almost a bit of a on duty, off duty kind of thing as well. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm going to get coffee because I need a break. So you go off duty and then suddenly the tracking doesn't work because of the status you're in rather than necessarily where you are. But I see a place as well as a time kind of question there. It's definitely worth thinking about. One last thing that we've just been started talking about this morning, and I've got to go and have a bit more of a conversation about it, is measles. So some of you all know the vaccination rate for measles in this country is not great at the moment. So we've got a risk score that we built for COVID, and the question's been asked. This is a ESR conversation, Alvaro. So you may well, Richard may be dragged into it, and you might be dragged into it too. So one of those questions of who should we be targeting for vaccination, so that we can do that equitably, and then also are there people we can identify that are at higher risk of hospitalisation if they aren't vaccinated? So we're moving on from COVID and we're moving on to measles, and we're trying to get a bit ahead of it because we don't have an outbreak at the moment, but it kind of feels like one of those imminent things. So something we're about to start looking at.
You're Justin.
I thought I'd better use some etiquette as I've been a bit late, but because I'm just conscious of time. But I just wanted to let this group know that this week we had a new person start in the team, which is fantastic. She's come from Fisher and Paykel. She's got like a design product background.
Cool.
So between now and Christmas, I'd just like to introduce her to a few people. Just focus on relationships first. So certainly, Michael, you're obviously on our hit list. Eileen and Mary, in terms of your understanding of 3D printing and what's going on in the world. our clinical engineering team is quite keen to do a bit of a rebaseline, like who's got what capability, where is it, what are they using it for. We do have an HRC activation grant, which I actually put on pause because I don't have a product owner. I don't have like a doctor saying, I want 3D printing. I've got individuals who are using it, but no one who wants to step up and own it for the hospital per se, which is understandable. But, and a question, John, that we've talked about in the past around product ownership and structures and what have you. But yeah, I guess just a message to you all. Her name is Melody Chen. She's really lovely. She's really keen on product design, not necessarily just limited to 3D printing, obviously, but it'd be great if you guys could make yourselves available to meet her and give her a perspective around product design in your area.
Yeah, cool. Maybe even connected to Igor out of Victoria.
100%. Yep. Yeah, the Victoria team and Richard and Capital and Coast. We're talking to Richard as well, and yeah. So nice. So we'll just try and connect that up and just get a bit of a sense, and then obviously feed it back to the centre.
Happy days, happy days. So we're working on a couple of things at the moment as well, Robin, Whitaker and I. So first one is we'll have some stuff coming out in the next week, hopefully, around setting up a national AI governance group for this, not for the sector, for the organisation. So we'll be calling for expressions of interest for that, and then we're going to establish an national innovation council. So trying to figure out how we do that, and it'll be connected a bit to the data and digital operating model, but kind of a question about the fact that innovation isn't just a data and digital thing, it's kind of a wider thing. So how do we do that? So try and figure that out.
That's great to hear, John, because I think if we can follow AI in terms of a way of managing a platform or a
so it's interesting because it's kind of the we're only going to make the AI one an expert advisory group, and so it'll report into accountability structures. But for the council one, I think it's probably going to be more of a kind of a leadership group to kind of give us a direction for the future. So yeah, so trying to figure out just what the scope of that group is and whether what sort of authority they have to do stuff is kind of an interesting question, because the last thing I think we want is that group telling everybody what to do, because there's plenty of stuff going on and we don't want that to stop, but we want to make sure everyone's kind of pointing in the same direction. So yeah, we'll see how that goes, and no doubt it will evolve. So
well, that's great to hear, John. Thank you for sharing that. We had our first innovation governance group meeting for 2 years last week.
Oh, really?
Because of COVID.
Yeah.
So Mike Shepherd, Mark Edwards, Greg Williams couldn't make it, Margaret Wilshire, Anthony Hawke, and they're just finding their feet again from a governance perspective. So being able to connect to this group.
Yeah, totally.
Awesome.
Oh, brilliant. That's good news. Yeah, we had a DHA session yesterday, so Digital Health Association session yesterday here in Wellington, and that was good. But it was just surprising that hardly any of those people had seen each other in the last 2 years. Do you know what I mean? So half of them didn't want to do the activity that we wanted to do, which was talk about how they participate in innovative stuff and how we build relationships, because we're so busy just talking to each other. Hey, I haven't seen you in 2 years. What have you guys been doing? So yeah, so it's amazing how bad it's got in that kind of context. And it'd be really interesting. I don't know if many of you are coming down for the Leadership Summit for HINS on the 5th and 6th, or the 6th and 7th of September, 5th and 6th. But I figure there's going to be a lot of that. So Robin and I are going to run an innovation table at that, because it's kind of a subject by table, and everyone gets to shift around and talk about their subject. So we're going to run that table on innovation there. So we'll see how that goes. So should be good fun. But I imagine there's going to be lots of tired voices by the end of it. Okay, well, it's been a good fun hour, and for the people that discovered that we're now on the eHealth forum, like Richard, and managed to log in, even though he's got his 4-year-old in the background somewhere, hopefully isn't burning the house down. So it'll be good.
No, I've just checked. She's still there.
Colouring in.
No news from hospital either, so
no news is good news until it's bad news.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah. So, well, thank you very much, everybody, for joining in, and we'll do this again in 2 weeks.
Nice
Thanks for your addition, Justin.
Cool.
You little
Awesome.
kitty.
See ya.
Very good.
Okay.
Right. Thanks a
Bye.
lot, guys.
Bye. Bye.
See you later.
Just found the link I was after.